Well, hello my friends, and even if you don't know me, welcome to this video channel. This is a fairly unusual format for my channel. It's going to be a travel video. There is some materials that I recorded in December while traveling in Kenya. I visited Nairobi. Most of the time I lived in Mlolongo, which is a smaller settlement not too far from Nairobi. I went to Malindi, which is a seaside resort near Mombasa. I went to Lamu Island. There is a small town called Naivasha, situated near Mt.Longonot, which is an awesome place for hiking. And I crossed Kenya by train. A lot of travels, a lot of different experiences. I did record a lot of footage in Russian language. Now the video is gonna come out in English. Also, whatever you try to record in Kenya, it's very loud usually on the street, and it's difficult to speak clearly. Not everywhere, but many places. Also, people would kind of look at you, see that you're filming something, so either you have to hide and find a private corner to record, or you will be constantly distracted. So rather than compiling the original footage, it will be stories told from the calm environment of my office. And perhaps I will remember something differently. Maybe it will be a different way to interpret what I saw back then. It's been over 4 months since I came back. I've been busy in the beginning of the year. I couldn't really do anything with this footage, and finally there is time to record something. A lot of things happened in this time period. For one thing, the war in Ukraine started, which was very unexpected and stupid on the part of Russia. And of course, it just didn't feel right. It didn't feel like a good time for any fun travel blogs to be posted. So whatever footage from Kenya, it was left on the shelf. First, a few words about how and why I ended up in traveling in Kenya. I met somebody on Tinder who invited me over for a visit. It was during the COVID period where travel was not readily available, required vaccinations and PCR tests and so on. For me, also difficult to travel. I need a visa to go anywhere. So it took a very long time, a lot of effort to organize this trip. When I came there, I had a place to stay. I had somebody to look after me, an amazing person, Noreen, who invited me over, whom I would want to call my girlfriend, and she actually gets mad at me if I don't. For me, it's a very strange relationship. We've only met in Kenya. I would say it's a long distance relationship kind of thing, which to me sometimes is difficult to process, so I will just call her my friend sometimes. And so at that time she lived in Mlolongo, which is suburbs of Nairobi. It's a smaller town, you can say, which I found amazing. It's an awesome place to stay, although it hasn't seen many European tourists. It's not a touristy location, which is even better for a travel blog. Almost like the infamous Kibera slum, except that people do live in apartment buildings. The apartment buildings are fairly normal, except maybe for the door locks, which I found very unusual way to lock the door by placing a hanging lock kind of like through a hole in the door on a deadbolt, which is on the other side. Just you'll see it on the video. The life on the street is very hectic, almost like a slum. There's a lot of vendors on the street. They're selling everything, ready-made meals, groceries, live chicken, a lot of traffic. The traffic probably was a bit dangerous for me because I don't expect cars driving on the left side of the road, and for the first few days while I was still adjusting, I would look the wrong way, while the drivers would not expect some absent-minded European tourist wandering around on the streets of Mlolongo. So that's one thing to consider. On the other hand, a lot of life there looked very much normal. For example, there was a soccer field right next to our house, where you would see teams just playing soccer, people hanging out, looking at the game. Very common sight in Mexico. I did compare Kenya a lot to Mexico because it was just the other place where I traveled. I don't think Noreen really appreciated that comparison. For one thing, I would keep calling like foreign tourists like me, I would say like gringo, and she told me nobody uses this word, nobody says gringo. And what I heard on the streets though was mozungo, so they always go mozungo, mozungo. That means a white person. There was a very normal diner right next to our house, a lot of small stores.
This one.
Yes, that's great. Yeah, that would be perfect.
Right? Medium.
Короче, нашел лавку с лампочкой. So how much for the light bulb?
Wait, this okay. 7 watts.
Oh.
Let's say 8 watts. 8 watts.
I'm not sure if that's the right one. Do you think it should more like pressed in?
Oh, let me see.
I can ask my friend what type of light bulb there is.
Then you have like
Fruits and veggies are fairly cheap. Prices are shown in Kenyan shillings, which is 100 shillings is a $1. A small mango is 5 shilling, a large one is 10. Avocados are 25 shillings, and tomatoes are 5. The large red mangoes are 20. There's potatoes, no price is shown. There's green bananas, which you have to fry. 5 for $10 for the onions. 10 shillings for the onions. Oh, I can go inside. Yeah. All right, cool, thanks.
welcome.
Oh, little kitten. Okay. There's different types of grains, mostly rice. Prices per kilo, so 130 shillings per kilogram. A different rice is 140 shillings for a kilo. Kamande, which look like lentils. All sorts of grains and all sorts of chips and packaged products. Detergent. Такая вот лавка. Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot. I'm looking for something else. I might come back here, but today is basically just my last day, so not gonna buy too much food.
You are welcome.
But thanks for showing.
Mama, good.
When it rains, life on the streets of Mlolongo becomes even more difficult. The streets have to be shared between pedestrians, cars, motorcycles, sometimes cows. There is a lot of dirt. People wear rubber boots. They need to go by with their lives, which means transporting things, just walking around, selling stuff. Even in such a difficult circumstance, everybody is super nice though. I have not been mugged. I have not had any trouble with the locals. In fact, they were always super nice. There's a lot of vendors. They work hard. They try to sell their products. Motorcycle drivers, they would offer you a ride. None of them ever wanted to steal. All they want is to work hard, you know, offer their services and so on.
I'm Kenyans. How old is you?
Russians and Kenyans are friends.
Yeah, of course.
Right.
Yeah.
I'll tell you what, where I grew up when I was a child, look similar to this. Many puddles when a lot of rain. Yeah. And little stores. And not always empty pocket. No, nothing in the pocket, you know.
No, I don't want to go to your pocket.
I'm telling you about my childhood. When I was young, nobody had any money, very poor.
But now?
Now, it's okay. It's a little bit better now. But it's okay in Kenya too. People buy everything, right? Say again?
Do you know how to speak in Kiswahili?
No, I don't.
Even in a small?
Muzungo? Paka. Mlima.
Mlima ni ile mount.
Yeah. I don't really speak the language. I speak some other languages, but know little about Swahili.
Where do you come from?
I live in Newfoundland.
What?
In Newfoundland.
Yeah.
Newfoundland is an island. That's where I live now.
Iran?
Not Iran. Newfoundland. Newfoundland.
Newfoundland.
Yes, it's an island on the north. Very cold. So here I enjoy the sun.
Climate.
Something that I found quite enjoyable were the Boda-boda rides, or the motorcycle rides. The drivers can carry 1 or 2 passengers, and there is sometimes space for cargo as well, for a suitcase or a box of bottled water. These rides are generally safe, as the drivers are very professional, although not always. I really enjoyed the rides in Mlolongo and Malindi, but did not at all in downtown Nairobi. The downtown area tends to be crowded, and there is a mix of people and cars and motorcycles. So when a motorcycle goes through the crowd, I just thought it was fairly dangerous, and I did have to take those rides a couple of times in Nairobi, and I felt responsible for the potential hazard that I cause, although it was necessary, because if you need to get from one point to another quickly, there is no other way. Even going by car is quite slow. In Mlolongo, there was a road construction going on, so to get from our house, La Jolla Apartments, to the mall, the Gateway Mall, we had to go either on the road against the traffic, and you will see that video right now, and if you took a car, that wouldn't be possible. You would have to go in the opposite direction for about 2 or 3 kilometers before making a U-turn, coming back to the exact same point where you started, just on the other side of the road, and then going to the mall, which was just about 5 kilometers away. Of course, it's also possible just to walk to the mall, but there is no nice pedestrian side roads and walking is about just as dangerous as getting a Boda-boda ride. I noticed that the drivers were more careful when Noreen was there as a passenger. The driver would go slowly and make smoother turns, and in general it would be a nicer ride. When I was just by myself, oh my gosh, it was completely crazy. The same driver could go way faster, was way more aggressive, so they kind of feel who the passenger is. Of course, they will try to overcharge foreigners. They would try to usually quote the price, which is about 50% higher than they would normally take, and they would agree to a lower price. If you know what it is, you can negotiate. Although those rides are fairly cheap, so I ended up actually paying them more than they asked, just because I was so glad that the ride went safely. I did enjoy them a lot, and every time we needed to go somewhere, I opted for the Boda-boda ride, while Noreen hated those. She always wanted to get a car ride. I will leave you here with this musical pause showing a ride from La Jolla Apartments to Gateway Mall in Mlolongo and back. Right. You can drop me off anywhere at this point. Alright. Oh my gosh, oh my gosh. While we're still talking about Mlolongo, let's discuss the post office. I wanted to send some postcards to my friend and a letter to somebody I know. So I went looking for the post office, and it was a walking distance from La Jolla Apartments. It was an interesting experience because you wouldn't find the things you would typically expect at the post office. For one thing, there was no envelopes on sale, and there was no postcards. Now this whole place was very small. It's a just tiny little cubicle, and the person who worked there had no cash to give me change, because I had 1,000 Kenyan shillings bill. So the lady who worked there had to go out briefly, probably to a nearby store, to break the bill. There were a lot of small PO boxes, which is a fairly convenient thing for the locals whose post is not very safe at the places where they live, or perhaps some buildings they don't even have those postal boxes. Overall, so I spent there about half an hour, and I got a feeling that in general people don't use post that much, because for the whole large neighborhood where several thousand people live, nobody came to the post office at all, and it was on a weekday, somewhere in the afternoon, and as I said, I spent there half an hour and there was nobody who came in there. To get an envelope, I had to walk to a nearby store that offered photography services, and they would put the final printed photos in their envelopes. I got one. The person actually offered it to me for free. He didn't ask for any money. The post stamps are really beautiful. There was some with Naivasha, which I noticed later on the video. I wish I bought just some post stamps as a souvenir, since there's no postcards. And another experience with the post was when I went to the central post office in Nairobi, essentially trying to achieve the same thing. I was looking for maybe postcards, some sort of souvenirs. And the postal office is Nairobi. It's fairly huge. Noreen told me that her father used to work there. I found something very similar to the one in Mlolongo, that there was no postcards, no envelopes, no supplies, but a lot of post boxes for people who live in Nairobi, or even in neighboring smaller towns, but maybe somebody who moves around for work quite a lot, and they would prefer to keep one single post box in Nairobi, which they can always check, you know, if not once a day, but maybe once a month at least. Overall, again, I got a feeling that post is not very important, doesn't play an important role, like as in people receiving bills or people receiving medical appointments and things like that. Everything is done just online or by telephone. So mail, while it exists and definitely works and serviced by the state, it just doesn't play that much of a role. From the dusty post office, let's move on to something more interesting, a hiking experience. So Mt.Longonot, it's one of the most beautiful trails in Kenya and one of the most famous ones. Definitely there is many awesome videos on YouTube about hiking Longonot. The mountain was a volcano with a big crater in the middle. The trail goes up the mountain and then around on the rim of the volcano. So there is kind of two portions of the trail. The first one is you just go up, which is about 450 meters ascent, and then if you want to go around, it's not really leveled, so you would need to go about 300 meters more, so overall elevation would be 2,800 meters. So on the very top you might feel the lack of oxygen just a little bit. The prominence is about 700 meters, so that hike is very much doable. without any preparation, and depending on your physical shape you might find it super easy or difficult. Ah, I see. So they rebuilt the shed.
Not yet.
But where we seated there was a shed.
That was from the tree there, the shrub.
Oh, you mean up here? Up?
Here you saw the round place that you consider the cemented hut.
Uh-huh.
You have a shed made of grass thatch.
Yeah, well, I'm glad they put it out. I'm glad that stuff didn't burn. That's still green. I don't even know, like, normally they would need an airplane to fly to get water from the lake and spray. I don't know how they...
That's exactly what happened.
They might have such airplane in Nairobi. The weather is usually nice. I've been at the mountain twice. Both times the weather was just awesome. It wasn't too hot, it wasn't too cold. The views are absolutely amazing. When you get to the peak, you see all this amazing big crater. There's no going down into the crater. I've heard that there's snakes down there. Besides, there's just no trail. It's very difficult to get down there. While you're on the trail, you may see a lot of wildlife in the park below. So there would be wildebeest and giraffe and zebras. They will be pretty far away. If you have a good sight, you'll see them. If you have a lens for a camera, you can see them. I was there at Mt.Longonot twice, and then my second day, it was a weekday, which wasn't very busy. There's very few people. And as I was walking towards the mountain, towards the beginning of the trail, a group of giraffes crossed right in front of me. And that's fairly rare to see those giraffes right in front of you. So I tried to get my camera, and by the time I got it, they just ran off. And let me tell you this, trying to chase the giraffes for a photo is absolutely impossible. So in the end, couldn't take a picture, but it's a very memorable experience. Mt.Longonot, it's not too far from Nairobi. It's only about a 2-hour ride by bus. There is a town nearby called Naivasha, and you have two options basically to get to Mt.Longonot. You can either just go with a tour, which means that you'll have to start very early in the day and get there, do your hike, come back to the bus, and the bus will take you back to Nairobi. Another option is just stay overnight in Naivasha. You can stay one night or 2 nights. We got there by bus. The bus to Naivasha, just a normal bus, would be about 200 or 300 shillings, so it's just $2 or $3. In Naivasha, there are a few things to do. There are some amazing local restaurants. There's a huge market along the side of the road. There are some places where you can go and see wildlife. You can see zebras and other animals. A lot of resorts and nice hotels where you could stay. Me and Noreen, we just stayed at Airbnb, for which we only paid about less than $20 a night. Naivasha is way less crowded than Nairobi and on Mlolongo. At nighttime, it's actually quiet, if not for the donkeys. And it's one of the nicest places in Kenya that I've seen. Aside from seaside resorts, I would say Naivasha is a very relaxing, interesting place. While we were checking in our Airbnb apartment, we came across a small store that was selling utensils. And we walked in there because Noreen needed to get a water bottle. And while looking at the merchandise, I just noticed that everything at the store was from Canada. You would have water bottles with the logos of Canadian banks like CIBC. There were some bottles with the names of Canadian towns near Vancouver. Some of the products had the labels, the price tags of Value Village, which is a chain store in Canada selling second-hand goods and such. And finally, what gave it away was a folder with some middle school students' paperwork on Terry Fox. Terry Fox is a Canadian athlete and activist who is considered a national hero. I was later told that Canada just sends containers of utensils, bottles, just different domestic products. They didn't sell at Value Village, and instead of just disposing of them, the government sends them to Kenya for free. It ends up being sold at small stores like the one in Naivasha. The prices are way lower than what you would see at Value Village, so in a way it's kind of a good deal. I also saw quite a few CDs of Oasis and some country bands. And when I was younger, Oasis was just one of my favorite musical bands. And somehow now Naivasha very much strongly associates with the music of Oasis, in my mind at least. I'm not sure, I don't think there are many fans of Oasis in Kenya in general, but that's a very interesting encounter. The lady who worked at the store told us that she wanted to immigrate, to move to the US or Europe or some other country, and when she found out that I'm Russian living in Canada, she immediately started asking me how to move to a different country. The first time when me and Noreen went to Naivasha, went to hike Mt.Longonot, was on December 12th, which is the holiday in Kenya, the Independence Day. And there were a lot of people, everything was crowded, but also seemed very festive. But then I came back to do a second hike about 2 weeks later, just on my own, because I just found this town to be so calming and so relaxing in comparison with Nairobi. Many athletes who come to Kenya go there to hike, big mountains like Mount Kenya, to do some extreme hiking. But if you're just a regular tourist without much athletic preparation, then just go to Mt.Longonot. There's a small entrance fee. It's better to pay with the local payment system, M-Pesa. They might not have exact change to give you. Of course, they do charge foreigners a little bit more than the locals. Either way, it's not really a high fee, and the experience is worth it. It's really great. And once you do the hike, you can just go down to one of the nice restaurants and enjoy the meal and relax and have a nice rest of the day. I had a strangest encounter on my second hike. I was trying to save some money. There was no Boda-boda rides from the foot of the mountain, so I had to do an extra hike after doing the Longonot hike. I had to still go about 3 kilometers to the main road so that I could catch a bus there. The guys in the bus tried to charge me 300 shillings just for a 20-minute ride to Naivasha, which of course it's not worth that much. And on the way back, the bus broke somewhere near Naivasha, and I thought that I could just walk from there. So I got 3 hikes in the same day: the Longonot hike, then the hike to the road, and then the hike home after my bus broke somewhere in the middle. By the time I got home, I was completely exhausted. But I remember it very, very well. If you're interested in hikes like that, I actually recommend that you search on YouTube about the Longonot hike, because other travelers may show it in a much better way than I do. Navigating the streets of Nairobi is a necessary evil if you want to travel cheaply. Buses are fairly inexpensive, but sometimes you need to change stations between going to local communities and going to a different city. The life on the street is hectic. There's a lot of dust, a lot of noise. Sometimes it's hot. There is very little respite from all this, and it can be quite disorienting. Do this only if you think you're ready. When I tried to get a bus ride from Nairobi to Mlolongo on my own, Noreen thought I was not going to make it. Thankfully, I actually did find my minibus. I was told that the streets are not 100% safe. There are some pickpockets. So if you walk around there just to pretend to know where you're going, don't dwell in one spot for too long. Keep all your possessions properly locked, attached, nothing that can be pickpocketed or taken easily out of your hands, such as a camera or a phone. All things considered, I found it safe and interesting. But there are places where you might want to go to find more enjoyable experience. So our next and final destinations will be Malindi, Jacaranda and Lamu Island. There are a few options to get from Nairobi to Malindi. The first, the most obvious one is just to fly there. The same for Lamu. There's an airport in Lamu. You can take a bus, a railroad. The railroad was built by Chinese fairly recently. It's really cheap. It takes $10 to get from Nairobi to Malindi. Actually, it goes to Mombasa, from where one would take a minibus or a regular bus company to go to Malindi. There is also Diani Beach, where I didn't go, but it's a similar experience on the seaside resort, touristy places and so on. Noreen and I chose Malindi quite spontaneously. We were aiming for Diani, and then once we got off the train, we just talked about some options. One possibility just to go to Mombasa first, to the center of the city where you could transfer to a different bus. And once we got in Mombasa, we had a walk there, and in the end we decided we're gonna try Malindi, which turned out to be a very good choice. We didn't have anything planned in advance, so we didn't have any hotel reservation or Airbnb or anything. We just thought we're gonna get there and find something. We got there, it was fairly late, around 7 o'clock. We walked around in the area where the hotels were supposed to be. There is a lot of like gated communities. Inside there would be bungalows, and one place was absolutely incredible. They had 2 swimming pools and access to the sea, to the ocean. So you could swim in the ocean, take a shower right there on the beach, and then swim in the swimming pool. The place cost us $40 a night. It was in a walking distance from several good restaurants. One is Coco Beach, situated on the beach, on the ocean. Another one we saw was Baobab restaurant, which served Western food, something that Americans, Europeans would be more familiar. But Coco Beach was also great. They served fish, a lot of fish in Malindi because it can be fished out from the ocean. We also we tried some pizzas, some burgers. Overall it was really great. We stayed in Malindi for several days. The weather was awesome. I didn't film that much because we were just enjoying life way too much, I guess. I did film a ride to Jacaranda. Actually, I just looked it up on the map and it's called Jacaranda Bay. It's a small community entirely dedicated just to serving tourists. There's not going to be any crazy commotion, very few street vendors, if any. We found that some signs there were in Italian. It seems to be a very strong Italian presence in that area. All these hotels and resorts have to be booked in advance. There's just no easy way to get in there. You cannot just come in and knock on the door. There are a few things that you can do there aside from just hanging out. There is a kite school, which is open sometimes, not always. When there is a low tide, you can walk quite far away into the ocean, about 2 or 3 kilometers. You can see some marine life in the smaller puddles that are left from the tide. You can see sea stars and crabs. There are places on the shore where you can sit and relax and get some snacks and drinks. Just being away from the crowds like that gives you a feeling of complete relaxation. It's a stress-free environment, just pure joy at the seaside. In contrast, the central part of Malindi can be quite busy, although you would find there some signs of civilization, like ATMs and way to exchange foreign currency, bus terminals, stores, everything that's needed for good life. Not too far from the Cocoa Beach is a famous Vasco da Gama Pillar, or Pillar of Vasco da Gama, is a most prominent physical reminder of the Portuguese influence in Kenya. The town dates back 600 years ago, and the Vasco da Gama Pillar remains one of the few remaining European monuments along the coast of East Africa. So you can go there, check it out, or you can just look at my photographs. The area around is really nice, so just walking in this area is a fairly pleasant walk. Nearby there was some really fancy hotel with a restaurant in which we wanted to go once. It was a buffet. It turned out that it needed a reservation in advance. In the end we couldn't do it. The prices everywhere is fairly modest. They're comparable to what you will get in a Western sort of fast food store, like if you go to KFC just to get some snacks in the Western world, that would buy you real dinner, the actual real restaurant in Malindi, and the food will be very tasty. We will finish the story in Lamu Island. After Malindi, Noreen and I headed out there, which is just situated 125 kilometers northeast. The island is separated from the mainland by about half a kilometer, so it's a short boat ride. Boats and fishing is a big deal in Lamu. Hundreds of small boats are available to carry tourists. The moment you step on the island, you feel a strong Islamic influence in the architecture. The streets are clean and narrow. They're perfect white colors and Islamic arches. They make a stark contrast with a simpler mainland architecture. The island is only 12 kilometers across, but it has more than one settlement. The biggest town is Lamu itself, but there's a smaller community, Shela, which is situated about 2 kilometers away. While this may seem like a walking distance, and sometimes it is, it depends on the tide whether one will walk or wade through the waters. We walked to Shela in the afternoon, and on the way back the path that we walked got flooded, got covered by the water up to our knees. It was fun though. The bigger town, Lamu, has more commotion, offices, markets, and a lot of donkeys, whereas Shela is a quieter place and it has a visible presence of European tourists. I was kind of surprised to see a guy wearing girls' clothes and having a makeup, because overall Lamu is very Islamic and you would think this would be shunned upon, but it's also very relaxed. There's no like strict Islamic rules or anything like that, so it's just very enjoyable for tourists. We did not really swim that much in the ocean in Lamu, but we tried to do a few other things for fun. We tried to hike to Takwa ruins on a different smaller island called Manda Island. Takwa ruins there remains of a thriving 15th and 16th century Swahili trading town before it was abandoned in the 17th century. Normally you would go there as a part of a tourist group on a boat, but we just decided to walk there, which was not a good decision because the distance was about 10 kilometers and the weather was really hot. In the end, we first came across a tractor which gave us a ride for a few kilometers until we crossed somebody on a motorcycle who offered us a ride to the ruins. It's not very easy to find the right path, so even just walking may not be the greatest idea. But we got there quickly. It turned out there's a certain entrance fee, which I admit I just didn't want to pay. Noreen went in there to explore the ruins on a guided tour, we got back the same way we came, took a motorcycle and then the boat. In Shela, where we stayed, we found one of the nicest restaurants. That place is wicked fancy. It has decorations, it's super clean. It's the highest number of European tourists I've seen in one place. When I saw how it looks like inside, I knew it was gonna be expensive. I just had a burger for $16 and Noreen's had some local dish. In the end, that's while it's not really an expensive place by Western standards, it's definitely above the typical Kenyan prices. Overall, in Shela, you may find some quite expensive hotels, over $100 a night. Where we stayed, we just spent one night for 60. In Lamu, there's some hotels, but you might have a difficult time checking in and finding available spots, so that has to be reserved in advance. There's also Airbnb in Lamu, which is typically available. We will end the story on this fine note. What I found about Kenya is that it can be very different depending where you go, from the nice hiking in Longonot to busy streets of Nairobi to places like Lamu or seaside resorts like Malindi and Diani. Everything is very different. You can find whatever you like for sure. One day I would love to go back there, and I hope that this video motivated you to travel as well. If you liked this video, hit the like button. If you love it, subscribe.